Hello everybody, Dr. Blue here. Personally, I'm very excited for today's video, and you should be too, because this is the Shadow of Mordor Blue review, a game that definitely left an impression on me, so let's get started. So first impressions of this game were pretty damn good. We were thrown into Udun, a land filled with Uruks that wanted nothing more than to banish and kill Talion after the murder of his family. We were also left with so many questions of why we didn't pass over with our family, and everything was so mysterious, and this game looked promising right from the very start. And I'm happy to say this is going to be one of the longer feature segments I've done in a while. Shadow of Mordor blew me away. The combat was incredible for starters. Being the main mechanical focus of the game, it should be anyway, but these guys definitely delivered. There were so many executions that you could pull off, Uruks shouting things at you and coordinating amongst themselves to attack you. The best part about that was the little nicknames they had for you, like the Ranger, Human, the Wraith, Gravewalker, Manswine, Manfilth, Tark, Blood, Meat, Glob. It was great. I really felt like I was a big enemy of the Uruks. I felt like I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was like what Uruks feared. I was like an urban legend, a scary story that Uruks told their little ones about the evil ranger that wanted to cut their heads off and they could never hope to kill. I really felt like I was a threat to their army. And speaking of the Uruks, this game did something very unique with them. If you look at almost every other game or movie and there's an enemy alien race, they all tend to look the same. And no, that's not me being racist. Games like XCOM do this with all sectoids looking the same. And other games do this too, such as Destiny and Gears of War as examples from the top of my head. And although they have different archetypes, every enemy in that archetype will look the same. What I mean by archetype is class, the type of enemy. So grunts would be an archetype and snipers would be another. And although this isn't really a bad thing because archetypes are essential to every and any game, Shadow of Mordor did it differently. Yeah, you had different archetypes of Uruks, but they topped this with their Uruk generator. Essentially what they did is compile all these different features like enemy archetype, face, body, role, skin colour, hair, the armour they're wearing, their strengths and weaknesses. And they pulled them all into this generator, and this generator would pump out these features in a random selection to generate entirely different Uruks every time. So you might see the same face on many Uruks, but that Uruk would have entirely different features than any other Uruk. So two Uruks could have the same face but different hair, role, skin colour and all the aforementioned features. This created it so that no two players would experience the same game, and each would have different enemies to face and different nemesis. Although the only letdown of this system was there wasn't enough of it. There was plenty enough so you wouldn't see duplicate Uruks, but you would see the same faces over and over again, or the same roles and same clothing and stuff like that. But the system's only drawback is that I want more of it, which I don't really see as a bad thing. The only example that comes to mind that doesn't make an alien race look all the same is Falling Skies. And they only really do that with the Volm. They kind of make all the other species look the same though, which sucks. The story on this game was also really interesting. As I said in the first impressions, we were left with so many questions, but what annoys me about other games is that they will answer your questions with questions and you end up not understanding anything at all. Whereas in Shadow of Mordor, they answer your questions but then give you more along the way. So for instance, when we picked up the artifacts, they gave us answers to Celebrimbor's past instead of throwing it all at us at once. And games tend to do this normally at the end of the game, like it's some big reveal. But we obtained our answers gradually as the story went on, and we got answers to why we were brought back and who was leading the resistance, and once we did learn his identity, why he was relevant to us and how Talion knew him. And they did a really good job with keeping me up with the rest of the story. I even got so excited with the story that I wanted to keep my audience, the people, updated on what they missed. So I created this small intro for this series at the start of every episode. That's how excited I became. I made my own little recaps and everything. Last time on Shadow of Mordor, we met up with the dwarf hunter Torvin to learn the way of the hunt and find the elven artifacts. We travelled with Torvin to find and refine our ways of dominating Caragors. After some practice, we managed to refine our skills. Torvin then told us about who had the artifacts, the mighty White Graug.
The mighty Graug? You give me these.
We then trekked down a regular Graug for practice. After learning its weaknesses, we managed to lure and capture this Graug. After successful capture of this Graug, we managed to take control of its mind and use it as our own, which we then used to squash an Uruk ambush. We then decided to face the mighty White Graug. Before the fight, we managed to find and retrieve the elven artifact. After waking up, we found the Great White Graug home and fighting Torvin. After a vicious encounter, we finally managed to defeat this Great White Graug. However, our journey with Torvin was over, so we waved goodbye and parted ways.
Right. Now how do I get you out of here?
And now, we learn the true power of the Wraith. Another great thing about this game is that you don't have to know much about Lord of the Rings to be into this game. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan, but I do know some basic stuff, but this game pretty much explained everything as it was introduced with the story. And if you still weren't sure about anything, this game had a nicely laid out codex that wasn't too lengthy and was interesting to read. Now the reason I mention this is because codexes are hard. It's very easy to have users not be interested in the game at all and skip the codex entirely, but this game kept me interested and I felt invested in the story. And this is because our main character Talion was given depth. He was an interesting character that felt human. At times he was very confused, distressed and lost, and other time he was angry, or he made himself feel superior to Uruks, or he was even intimidating at times. He also had leadership qualities that came from his time with the Rangers, and we saw his traits as a father shine through too. And through this range of emotions that blended together well to make up this character, they pulled me in. I liked this guy, I wanted him to succeed, I genuinely cared about his struggles and if he ended up with what he wanted, to be reunited with his family. Through a main character, you can get the user interested in the codex and the entire story if need be. And I haven't seen a game do that as well since Mass Effect 2. By the way, I'm like the biggest Mass Effect nerd you'll ever meet. Seriously, that codex was like a sacred text to me. The abilities in the game were great too. You'd level up by taking out high-ranking Uruks, and the more powerful they were, the more power points and XP you'd get. And you could unlock new ones until you had total control and dominance over them. And there were two sides to these abilities. If you wanted to stay true to your roots, you could acquire the Ranger powers, keeping with Talion's side and what he brings to the table. But you've then got the powers of the Wraith, who had all these ghostly powers to defy the laws of physics and almost cheat your way around these Uruks, leaving them at a huge disadvantage and allowing you to decimate armies that, with Ranger powers alone, would be impossible. So it's like these two characters bring their abilities into this one melded character that had access to both, and you can see why Celebrimbor brought Talion back and why he felt that with his help they could retake Mordor. And seeing as this whole story is about the two of them, it really shows why they need each other and what they can accomplish as one. On their own, they couldn't really do it, but together, it just brings this Uruk nightmare to life, and I think it's just so good we were shown both sides of the coin in this game. I used both sets of powers so equally because they were all so useful. Every little thing mattered in those powers, and that's what's so great about it. I mean, you can do things like make groups of Uruk's heads explode, build up an execution streak, burn huge groups of Uruk in this blue ghastly fire and shadow strike to them and cut their heads off. Oh, it was just so great. Honestly, I meant it when I said the combat was really good. It's arguably some of the best combat I've ever seen. And the combat wouldn't always work too, and you might be thinking, but Dak, why are you putting that in the feature section? That sounds like a criticism. And that's a great question, Eric. It's because of this Nemesis system that this game is famous for. Sometimes when you'd kill an Uruk and you didn't chop their heads off, they would survive their wounds and come back for you to kill you. Sometimes they'd have scars, sometimes they'd have metal chunks over their faces, and other times they just have a heap of bloody bandages held together by rope to cover their destroyed faces from being battle scarred so much.
Me not dead. Now make you dead.
You're gonna be dead for the final time, Asgron. Just me and you, buddy. You're ready to die. And what was really great is everyone had that one Uruk they fought who just would not die that you saw in the final battle. The guy who bugged you the most and you'd someday get to chop his head off. And whatever you do to these guys, they remember. So if you ran away from their last fight, they'll mention it. Or if you hurt them last time and they came back, they'll mention it. Or if they're a bodyguard to a guy you're trying to kill, they'll mention that. Almost anything you do that has any kind of significance, these guys will mention when you meet them again. If not, they'll just talk about their role. So if they're a Caragor hunter, they'll mention how you're nothing compared to the Caragors they've killed.
Dark wings have brought me here to finish you.
Well, actually, I came to you, motherfucker, so how's that? But there are flaws in this Nemesis system, but I will talk about that later in the criticism segment. Moving on to the runes for now, you'd acquire these ancient buffs and power-ups that would bolster your control over the Uruks, giving you abilities like recovering health after stealth kills, or that countering enemies would occasionally set them on fire, or being able to take one more last stand before you can be executed, or a 50% reduction to all melee damage you take, and so many more. And I'll be honest with you, I put even more time into my story to 100% it, and I've got over 160 hours in it now. 100%ing it took maybe 50 hours, and the rest is just me having too much fun killing Uruks in this game. And I've got a hell of a setup with my runes. I'm practically invincible. Okay, so you can see my runes on all my sword, bow, and dagger, and you can see most of them are just legendary because I've spent so much time in this game just killing captains and getting these legendary runes. It just makes it so OP. And then you can do these small missions around the map to turn the bow, dagger, and sword into these legendary artifacts. And once you've created these legendary artifacts, you'll unlock their abilities. So for instance, on the dagger, you can freeze time for about 10 to 15 seconds, and you can kill any Uruk in the area, and it'll be automatically a stealth kill. And so if you're surrounded, you can activate this thing and just execute every Uruk in the area super quickly. There's also bonuses for the sword and bow too, just take a look. And so there I am, going through the story, fighting this army, and halfway through the story, you get access to a second area. A second area that isn't Udun, so it's not all volcanoes, lava, and dead plant life. You can go to a whole different area filled with miniature cities for the Uruks, including a fishing town, a couple of other fortresses, and stormy seas, and better yet, a whole other army for you to fight your way through and cut down every Uruk that dare stand in your way. And whilst you're doing that, you've got the army in Udun repopulating, so when you do decide to go back, a bunch more captains have filled the holes you left in their army for you to kill again. Then there's the beasts of Mordor, like the Deathhawks, which are the birds that you can sometimes kill, and the Caragors and the Grauls that you can control and manipulate once you learn to ride them with Torvin. And of course the scary ghouls that appear in a rather dramatic fashion.
Rangers should go now. Very dangerous here. We wait at the ancient tower for him.
Alright. What is it, more Uruks? Boss, maybe? Oh, what the fuck? Whoa! What the fuck, dude? These beasts just drive home the fact for me that Mordor is a scary, scary place. The intel system was really looked into as well. If you dominate any Uruk for information, you'll be able to learn captains' identities because Uruks have to know who's in charge. Then if you dominate a captain, war chief, or mole, you'll get intel on any Uruk captain or war chief. And you'll do this to learn their strengths and weaknesses, and although it can be a bit tedious, you can dominate a war chief, dominate 5 bodyguards for him to have, and then every time you summon him, you'll get 6 pieces of intel on the armies. A little like an intel train. Going back to the executions that were great and plentiful, there's any number of ways you could kill Uruk, and they were satisfying, amazing to look at, and felt great to pull off. Although the only thing I would poke in that is that you kill so much that you can kind of see a bit of a repetition in the executions, but that's not a huge deal. I also have to give credit where credit is due. The stealth and the parkour in this game are fantastic. The parkour is really smooth. The stealth is possible and actually works. You can evade big groups of enemies easily if you need to, and manipulate the environment to have them scatter, like destroy a wall for it to collapse down on top of them, or cut a Morgai fly nest to have the flies scatter the Uruks. And then another mechanic I really liked was the Uruk society machine. Uruks would sometimes fight amongst each other for power and dominance, and so some might have a feast and others will ambush each other and execute each other to usurp each other. And then they'll try and become a war chief someday, and it was great because there's this little achievement that you let an Uruk kill you, make sure he makes it to war chief, and then execute him at war chief. And so if you want, you can do a bit of role play and follow this little Uruk's career that he built from killing you, and then at the peak of his career you come right back around and you cut him down. And then on top of that, once you enter Nurnen, you can start to brand your own Uruks and infiltrate this army yourself. And you can have your own Uruks send death threats or give you intel on other captains or have them kill other captains or even become a war chief's bodyguard and have him betray that war chief. And then you've got moles at the top of the Uruk army. It's just so amazing, the capabilities of this game. It truly stunned me how much you could do in it, and I've probably not even covered half of it. There's probably more good shit, but for now, let's move on to the shorter section for once and get to the criticism. Now, there aren't many places where this game goes wrong, but there are a few that fall through the cracks, and to rectify them, we have to talk about them. First off, I want to talk about the hunting challenges. There are little hunting challenges where you kill little spiders, deathhawks, caragors, ghoul matrons, all the way up to graugs. And now, while these hunting challenges are fun and all, the reward is a little underwhelming. It's just Mirian, which is the currency you use for upgrades and stuff, but by the time you're doing these challenges, you've probably completed the story and got all the upgrades anyway. So you're just getting extra Mirian that you can't really do anything with, and I just wish they'd given you something more substantial, like a hunter version skin of Talion. Because in the main menu, you can play as other characters if you want. The reason I'm mentioning this in the criticisms is because these characters are just skins. So when you play as Lithariel, you don't have all the sounds from Talion, and she's just killing Uruk silently. Which is okay, but when you go back to Talion, you hear him doing all these sounds, it just feels so empty. And then you get gameplay that looks like this. But it does state that they're skins. I just wish they'd put some voice acting into those skins so they didn't feel like a disguise. But even with the voice acting, it'd still feel that way, because Lithariel changes into Celebrimbor every so often. Some other letdowns in this game are the Nemesis system, which I mentioned earlier. Sometimes when you want to kill Uruks, some people have experienced an Uruk coming back 18 times. Or sometimes if you want an Uruk to come back, late game, it feels very much like that never happens. And it kind of fades away in the late game, which is a shame. The Nemesis system just isn't very consistent. One thing about the Uruk generator is that I don't think there's enough in there. But as I said before, that's only really me wanting some more of it. But there is something that bothers me a little, but you won't see this in any other Shadow of Mordor review. And it's because I'm reviewing this game so late that I've seen the next game's trailer, Shadow of War, which is the sequel to Shadow of Mordor. And the Uruks in this game don't feel as diverse now, because in Shadow of War, you have these huge mini Graug-esque Uruks that are just huge, and then you've got these little tiny ones, or ones that act as human battering rams.
It's the Lord of Mordor himself, the Grave Walker.
So in this game, they don't feel that diverse compared to that game, but as I said, I'm just really complaining about something I only just learned is going to be in their next game anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Another thing that does bug me is the events that go on in Uruk Society. You start to see that there aren't that many of them. There's only really about 15 events that Uruks can have, which makes it seem like they're extremely uncreative, which may very well be true, but there's got to be some Uruk brainiacs in there. And I also see how some people might find this game a bit repetitive with just the killing of Uruks constantly. Personally, I don't really feel that way. It doesn't get boring for me, but I can see how it could get boring for other people. One other thing I admit is a bit of a nitpick. When you execute an Uruk by chopping his head off, the neck textures are, well... And finally, this little nitpick. They mention at the start of the game, and Uruk's title represents his role in society, but after a while I think they went off the rails with this a little bit, because some of the titles I've seen, I'm not really sure translate into society. Overall, I feel this game did an absolutely amazing job, and some of the only problems I have with this game is that I want more of it. I cannot wait for Shadow of War, where they seem to have seriously stepped up their game with everything. So for a true rating, and this shouldn't surprise you that it's going to be high, but I bet you didn't expect a 10 out of 10. Along with my seal of approval, The 10 is on the scale, and I'm not afraid to use it. I truly believe that this game brings it home with the outstanding job that they've done here. Should you buy it? Eric, what are you even asking me that question for? Are you stupid? Yes, go fucking buy this game and play the shit out of it. I fucking love this game, and I still play it even to this day because it's just so incredible. But anyway, that has been it from me, so thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this Blue review. If you liked it, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. I've been Dr. Blue, you've been my audience, and I'll see you guys next time.
I'm blue.